How are you doing YouTube? It's your friendly gamer, SmartEntity here. Today we're going to talk about high wave defense, getting the Nyx Prime BP, and we're going to do a quick little update on trading prices. And finally, I'm just going to wrap up some of the recently released weapons that I haven't had a chance to talk about, and give a bit of an update on what you can expect in the near future on my channel. So to begin with, let's talk about high wave tower defense. Now recently I've had a lot of people, questioning me about Rage quick thinking nerf, is this still possible to do high wave defense, high level survival? And also, I've never really done a high level defense on my channel. I've done a lot of high level survivals either on the channel or just for my personal gameplay, but thus far there's very little incentive for doing high level defense. With the recent release of the new Nyx Prime access, I guess, there is obviously the incentive to do a high level or high wave defense for that Nyx Prime BP. Now in this particular defense that we did, we wasn't really planning, or we didn't really organize anything to do a high wave defense. We're just trying to get the Nyx Prime BP. We did end up doing 55 waves, which is what it took for us to get the BP. But other than that, there was very little, pre-planning. Now, I didn't actually host this myself, so I didn't really get to customize the team. But basically, the host that did host this, he did do a bit of Mastery Rank filter. So 3 of us were Mastery Rank 17, and the last guy, I believe, was Mastery Rank 15. So we all knew what we were doing, and we all had a decent arsenal to go at it. So we have a Frost Prime, which is what I'm playing. The host was a Rhino Prime. Personally, I would never recommend a Rhino for high wave defense or survival, just because it doesn't scale very well. But this particular guy, he was using Roar a lot, which helped a lot, and he also came with Corrosive Projection, so that was a necessity. We had a Excalibur Prime for Radio Blind, and we had a overextended Nova for a Speed Molecular Prime build. Now, as a, quick rule of thumb, it is highly recommended for all 4 players to bring Corrosive Projection in high wave defense as well as high level tower survival. Now, the reason for that basically is because when you have 4 Corrosive Projection, that offers 100% armor reduction, which is an absolute god-saving grace against those heavy gunners, which is really the only enemy that I found to be a bit of an issue with high wave defense and high level survival. Now, I've had quite a few people asking me, Corrosive Projection does 30% armor reduction, so should we just have 3 people with Corrosive Projection and 1 person with something else, so it's 90% armor and obviously not wasting 20%? The answer to that is no. Having 100% armor reduction is better than having 90% reduction on something else. That 10% armor reduction at high level, anything above, I would say level 80, and extremely noticeable at level 100 plus heavy gunners, that 10% armor reduction makes a huge difference, and there's nothing else, no other auras currently in the game that is better than having, 100% full armor reduction. Now, having said that, in this particular game, only 3 of us had Corrosive Projection because one of the guys didn't have it. And it is noticeable compared to my 60-minute plus T4 survival experience. So I am using the Frost Prime specialized build that I released a while back. I'll show the build again towards the end. Only difference is I am using Corrosive Projection, as I stated. So the strategy we employed basically is I do the 4-second Snow Globe recast continuously. I'm not doing it all the time just because there's really little danger, but when we are getting swarmed, that's what I do. 4 seconds Snow Globe recast to guarantee invulnerability. The Nova will cast Molecular Prime to increase enemy speed, so they rush us, so they'll die faster basically. Now, we don't really have any risk of death because obviously Snow Globe will keep them in bay, and Excalibur will cast Radio Blind when they do get quite close, so the speed to gain from Molecular Prime is really not that big an issue as identified in that MOA just then. The Excalibur's target is really basically to cast Radio Blind just when they're in range of the lasers. We didn't actually have to use lasers until about wave 30. Up to then, enemies were getting one-shotted and it was safer and it's more efficient to just use weapons. But from wave 30, I was finding it difficult to one-shot them, so using lasers just became a bit more efficient. Our goal here was to, basically rush this or increase wave numbers as fast as possible for Nyx Prime BP farm. Now, the thing with this is, as you noticed throughout the video clip, basically my priority is not so much to shoot enemies. My priority is basically to activate lasers when I can and just keep on running around the pod to scan to make sure there's no enemies inside the pod. Now, a couple strategies that I would heavily recommend in tower survival is one, stay with the pod. Now, a lot of people don't like whole heroes because they take the experience point and it's not shared because they're so far away from the group. Personally, I don't care about that. The reason I want people to stay in the pod is because, one, if you're away and you die, no one else is going to run to you and save you because we need to protect the pod, and if we run away and protect you, we risk dying. The second main reason is currently, as the AI works, is they seem to take priority at aiming at you other than the pod. So when you are near the pod, you take damage. The pod doesn't. From experience, the pod doesn't seem to have any armor whatsoever, and from wave 35 plus, I would say, it literally takes one heavy gunner less than 5 seconds uninterrupted to kill the pod. Now, that seems to be a long time, but when you aren't paying attention or people are running around the map, getting loot and whatnot, and you got one heavy gunner next to the pod, uninterrupted, the mission literally just dies like that. So it's for that reason that, everyone really needs to keep alert and just stay close to the pod and don't, mess around, because the mission will end and you'll lose a lot of, progress from that. Now, I do want to quickly mention Rage and Quick Thinking again. I released a video to show which frame are still good with Rage and Quick Thinking and which isn't as good, and you're better off with Redirection and Steel Fiber. But having said that, I do have to admit, it's been nerfed, hands down, there's no doubt about it, and with that nerf, the game is that much harder. The game is easy at baseline, but when you're at 60 minute, 80 minute, or, wave 40 plus tower defense, it is a bit harder, and without Rage and Quick Thinking, it's that much harder. But having said that, it's definitely possible still to reach a high wave defense or high level survival. Basically, after your 60 minute survival or 50 wave defense, weapons become less and less effective, and what you really need to depend on is Warframe powers. Powers that cause crowd control and powers that cause damage that scales. Now with defense, obviously you have lasers, use them, they're good. But with survival, you don't have lasers, and you really need powers that scale. Noticeable examples are 1, Max Shield Polarize, and 2, Nyx's Absorb. Now, Absorb have been nerfed. I will do a video with Nyx Prime on that. But basically, Absorb is still a very good power, it still scales, and especially if you have a really good Trinity with Energy Vampire, Absorb can still be very effective at high level. Now, finally, I'm going to do a quick little mention on trading prices. Now, Nyx Prime Access got released, well, quite literally, yesterday, and with all new Prime Access releases, there's crazy trading prices. So we got Haiku, the Sindel, and the Nyx. I'm just gonna pause the video here and have a quick look at the wiki, basically. Okay, so here are 3 trading patterns that I've noticed with new Prime release. The first pattern is, quite obviously, new Prime items cost a lot, right? So it's definitely worth farming for them and selling them for plat. The second pattern I've realized is, this may not be noticeable, but certain rank 10 mods drop price when new Prime Access release. So if you think about your Redirection, Vitality, Steel Fiber, Heavy Caliber, Narrow-Minded, Blind Rage, Serration, Hornet Strike, these are arguably by far the most common rank 10 mods on the market, and when new Prime stuff get released, prices of these stuff drop. And the reason for that, I believe, is because people want plat to buy these new products, right? So they sell what they have, so they have plat to buy these new products. So current prices, basically with your ranked in common, so your vitality, redirection, steel fiber, they've again dropped back to about your 70 plat range. So if you think about a couple of weeks back, they were selling for, or the lowest price you can find on the market is probably around 100 to 150. Probably more likely to be 120 to 150. But now you can still get them again at 70 plat. With your Serration and Hornet Strike, again, you can get them at about the 150 plat range. A while back, they were going about 180 to 200, so now they dropped down again. With your Heavy Caliber, Blind Rage, and Narrow-Minded, they've dropped back to about 250. The lowest I've seen in the past, I guess, year was about 200, so you haven't dropped down to, bottom, but at 250 is still pretty good compared to, say, a couple of weeks back, where you're looking at about 300 to 350, so that's your rank 10 rare, so Heavy Caliber, Narrow-Minded, and Blind Range. Now with your Kubro mods, so your linked mods, so linked health, linked shield, linked armor, your bite, and your, I guess, Mo, these rank 10 mods, prices always change with stores. I personally don't really concern myself too much with them, for the main reason that, one, they're not that popular among players, and two, I just don't like Kubros, right? They are not as good as Carrier, they have upkeep cost, and honestly, they just die way too often, so I'm not gonna concern myself with them. Yes, with obviously a reactor format, max rank 10 build, they're a bit more bulky and don't die as easily, but at high wave defense and high level survival, I just don't find them to be as useful as Vacuum, simple as that. So that's a quick talk about rank 10. Now with a new Prime, I do want to teach you guys a bit about spotting prices and pattern. So first of all, obviously new Primes cost a lot, but if you're trying to make a profit on them by buying and selling, you definitely can, there's potential, but it's not something I would recommend. The main reason for that is because these things drop in prices so fast. This week you have one price and the next week they'll literally drop by half. So unless you can get a really good deal, I wouldn't recommend buying and selling. But that aside, let's have a quick look at prices. So the Syndol. Now, basically with Blueprint Blade, I wouldn't recommend spending more than 20 plat on them. If you're selling, you can definitely get away with selling at 40 plat each. With a handle, this one's a bit more trickier. Now, I just wouldn't buy it at baseline because it's expensive. If you're selling it, it's definitely to sell at 50, 60, or even more. The thing with new Prime products is you'll always find that one random person that'll pay so much more compared to the average if you stay in chat long enough. So 50, 60 is the norm, but if you stay in chat long enough, you can probably find someone who's willing to pay a bit more for it. With a Haiku, now the star is a bit more rarer than the pouch. So the star, I've had one person telling me he sold a star for 50 plat. You probably won't find a 50 plat buyer, but if you sell it for 30, 40, it's definitely possible. With a Blueprint, same story, 30, 40, very easy. The pouch, now the pouch is an interesting one. It's T1 capture, so in theory it should be quite easy. But I've run over 30 T1 captures, I only got one pouch, so the drop chance seems to be very low. Now selling it at 20 plat would be, I guess, an easy sell, or buying at 20 plat would be a easy buy. But if you're selling it, I definitely recommend selling it at about 30. So buying at 20, selling at 30 is a good deal. Nyx. Now, it's no surprise that the Warframe parts always sell more than the weapon part. With Blueprint, I would definitely recommend selling it at about 100 plat right now. So guys, by the way, Prime Access just released about yesterday, so these prices are good for about 3 to 4 days. Next week, prices are going to drop dramatically. So right now, the Blueprint, you can get away with selling at 100 plat. You can probably get away with selling a bit higher if you get lucky. The helmet, 40 to 50 plat if you're selling. The chassis, probably 80 to 100 plat if you are selling. The system, again, you're probably looking at about 60 to 80 plat if you're selling. Now, these are just selling prices. Buying, obviously, I recommend buying at a lower price. But the problem is, all these parts are so expensive, I just simply do not recommend buying. But for the purpose of the video, if you're buying blueprint, 50 plat, helmet, 20 plat, chassis, 40 plat, systems, 20 to 30 plat. Those are the buying prices. Chances are it's hard for you to find someone who's willing to sell at those prices, but that's the price I recommend buying. So that's a quick update on trading prices. Now, obviously, your low-key prime, prices will decrease a lot. Most parts will be 5 plat. The only thing that's pretty still worth anything is the helmet, but you're probably looking at 30 to 40 plat for the helmet. Bodor obviously decreased as well. Bodor Prime BP, classically you were selling at 50. Even a month ago it was still good for about 40 plat, but now 20 plat will sort of be the norm. Rhino Prime obviously is down to the core now. All parts are about 5 plat each, which is the norm. You can get away selling at 10 of course, but 5 to 10 would be your sort of general norm. Oh my god. Okay, so back to the defense. Now, I just skipped ahead to wave 55, where we ditched, basically. So, as a quick, summary, for a high wave tower defense, I recommend Frost Prime. Obviously, for that 4-second continuous invulnerability snow globe, I recommend a Nova, not a Speed Nova. In this case, we had a Speed Nova because we were trying to farm for next BP, or trying to rush. But for, if you are trying to target 100 wave, whatnot, definitely go with a Nova with no intensify and no overextended, so just max Mercury Prime. Because obviously having increased speed, do increase your risk of dying. Third frame I recommend is Nyx. Now in this game we had a Excalibur, which replaced Nyx as far as crowd control goes. So with Excalibur, use Radio Blind. With Nyx, use Chaos. But the thing with Nyx is you can have Absorb as well, which is always helpful. The final frame, I always recommend Trinity, just because of the Energy Vampire. Now, I know a lot of other players don't really bother with that, they just use Energy Place. If you wanted to dump Energy Place, that's fine, but if not, Trinity is definitely a frame I recommend. But if you are wanting to dump Energy Place, which is pretty much half a Trinity, you can pretty much go with any other frame. Other popular frames do include things like Mag with Shield Polarized, Volban with Bastille or Vortex, Rhino obviously with Roar and Stomp. So all these are viable frames, or even Loki with Radio Disarm. But generally, if you are trying to organize something and you can't be sure what you want, just go with Frost Prime, Nova, Nyx, certainly to be Nyx Prime, and Trinity. So we did manage to get to, wave 55. We definitely could have gone higher, but again, no point when you have a Nyx Prime BP, which is worth about 100 plat. So wave 55 tower defense, it's definitely up there. So yeah, as far as high wave defense goes, this is definitely considered high wave, not extreme gameplay, but definitely high wave. And finally, I just want to quickly go over some of the weapons that I haven't had a chance to go over yet, so I can have a clean slate with Prime Access, Nyx Prime Access. So, recently released weapons, the Buzzlock. This is a master rank purpose only weapon. If you don't know the definition of my tiers, just have a look at my specialized weapons tutorial video. Basically, I have 3 tiers. Top tier, which is something that's worth your potato, worth your 5 to 6 polarities. Your mid tier weapons are those weapons that maybe worth a potato, but not so much worth your Formas, just because yes they're strong, yes they're fun, yes they're good, but they are not as strong as a top tier weapon that pretty much overall replaces them. And then I have my master rank purpose only tier, where they're simply put just bad weapons that are weak and not worth a potato and not worth a Forma in my opinion. Again, as I always say, if you are not as plat conservative as I am, just go all out with potatoes. Every weapon, any weapon, MK1 weapons included, are that much more fun, that much more stronger with potato. So that aside, Buzzlock. Now this is a novel weapon where you get the sort of tracking system, so it's quite new, but because of low damage output and honestly with the tracking, even on paper it sounds quite good, but at high level gameplay I didn't find it to be that useful. So overall mastery rank purpose only weapon, so not worth a potato and not worth a Forma as far as my gameplay concerned. Now, the Galaxian, which is a weapon that was recently released, but I haven't had a chance to obtain that yet, so that I'll leave for the near future. Another weapon that was recently released was the Guinea tech weapon, the Nucor. So this weapon, again, looks quite new, it's quite fun to play with, but as far as DPS, damage goes, and in-game play goes, it's really not up there. So again, master rank purpose only weapon. And as far as the new melee weapons go, we had the At-Rex or At-Rex or whatever you call it, the new whip. Now this weapon, surprisingly, is a top tier weapon. So if you have a look at this weapon and compare that to the Du Icus, so this weapon is literally the only other weapon that satisfy a crit build as far as melee goes and as far as top tier weapons goes, to compare with the Du Icus. So as far as damage goes, it has overall higher damage. It has the same crit multiplier as well as crit chance. All other stats are not that significant. It does have a slight lower attack speed, but if you do a DPS calculation with just damage and attack speed, the T-Rex actually have a higher damage. So all in all, I wouldn't say it's better than the Du Icus, just because the Du Icus still seems to have better traveling utility. And you know, if you see my previous videos, I definitely consider traveling utility to be half of a melee weapon's attributes. But having said that, the T-Rex definitely still have very good traveling utility and it's definitely top tier. I haven't had a chance to compare a head-on yet because I've just added a forma to mine. So for those that don't know, you basically need 1 bar polarity with the correct stun polarity to fully max a melee weapon. So I do a comparison later on when I do a full T-Rex video. But so far, a T-Rex is definitely worth your potato and definitely worth that 1 forma. Another quick update is Electron Rays. Now I've added my final polarity. So to max a primary that's not a bow, you need 6 polarities. So I finally added my 6th polarity, my 5th forma. So I do a head-on comparison between the Electron Rays and the Electron Prime once I've maxed that. So you can also, expect to see these kind of things in the nearby future.